first workshop devoted to security of critical infrastructure. For those who don't know me, my name is Marina Shteinberg. I'm a director and co-founder of Pentagram Advisory.
And I'm Tim Slattery, the other director and co-founder of Pentagram Advisory, and welcome to you all. Today, I'd also like to, at this point, welcome our special guest, Mark McConnon from Taswater. Mark is Head of Risk and Resilience at Taswater, and Mark's going to share with us his experience of, I suppose, our tool to assess risk management program maturity and assurance maturity. And so what we'll do in terms of this presentation today, Marina and I will work through the tool with you so you understand the basics of it. And so when Mark then speaks about his experience or Taswater's experience of it, you'll have that context to appreciate what he says going on. Okay, Marina.
To introduce security maturity assessment and evaluation model for Critical Infrastructure Risk Management Program, or CIRMP, or CRIMP, as people call it differently. We have been thinking with Tim a lot about the best way to assess ongoingly the development of a risk management program and how you can track how you're going. So some organizations run audits. You can do an internal audit, you can do an external audit. The audit can happen before your annual reporting to the Department of Home Affairs. However, audit is point-in-time check. So even when auditors produce the report, things might move. So we thought about what's the best way, firstly, to support compliance. Secondly, to see how you're growing as an entity, and to identify areas for improvement in governance, mitigation, risk controls, etc. So with the model we developed, it's not an audit. It's a live tool to assess maturity of your risk management program that gives you a snapshot of where you are at the moment, but also identify areas for improvement.
A focus of our work is to empower people to be able to help themselves, to help them understand and give them tools that they can build on and use without having to consult, to ask us or other consultants back in. So the key feature of this, as Marina said, it's not a point in time. If you, because you're managing this data, change, you improve a mitigation or whatever else, you can recalculate where you are in the process. So it gives you a very dynamic sense of where you are in terms of managing your risk management program maturity and overall security posture. Why does it matter? Going from what I've just said to you, we operate in a very dynamic environment. And so an audit, as Marina said, is a moment in time, and that's not the solution that we need to actually understand what's happening to the threats and the risks then that could be relevant to our infrastructure. It's dynamic, as I said. Setting aside the threat environment for a moment, you might build a new piece of infrastructure or significantly modify a piece of infrastructure, or the area around your piece of infrastructure might have some other change that was not foreseen. So you're able to, in this sort of approach, say, what is changing with respect to my infrastructure ownership, its operations and the assets that I'm responsible for. The other element then is the threat picture. So what is happening in the world today? We do find when we talk to clients that they're very local in their perspective about what relevant threats could be out there that could impact on their assets. Part of our job is to expose to them there's a broader array of threats out there that you might need to contend with, and they change all the time. Now, whether it's environmental, whether it's foreign interference, whether it's the people in your workforce under a whole lot of other stressors, and maybe in their private life that they can bring into the workplace, they may not have been like that 2 years, 2 weeks, whatever, long ago. So it is important then to have this process to capture the dynamism of the operational context in which all the SOC entities operate.
So in terms of the structure of security maturity and assessment and evaluation model, we identified all requirements for risk management program, all obligations that sit under the SOC Act and CIRMP rules. We have also identified similar obligations that sit under the SOC Act and Telecommunications Security Risk Management Program rules. And you will see that for CIRMP rules, there are 59 obligations, And for telecommunications sector, there are 77 obligations, which is of a different value, and we'll touch on that a bit later. So we split maturity assessment categories into 8 core categories that also reflect to 8 categories or around risk management program. We have 4 maturity levels, and we'll explain them a bit further. And also we'll talk about the dashboard with heat map. This is my favorite part in terms of how it looks like after you've done all assessment, all that hard work, and one visual tool that gives you the snapshot of where you are at the moment.
In terms of the obligation types, under the legislation and the rules, we have the musts so far as is reasonably practicable, and the must have regard to. And you can see on the right-hand side the legend description there. When you're going through the risk management program and the assessment tool that we've created here, clearly the musts are binary. You must do those things, otherwise you will fail to comply, automatic breach from Home Affairs perspective. The second one, as far as is reasonably practicable. Yes, you are obliged to do those things, but the implementation is relevant to your size of business, the type of business, the maturity, and so on. So there's a degree of flexibility there. You have, as I say there, to take all reasonable steps. Now, anyone who understands anything about the law, reasonable is not an absolute term, it's subjective. So it is all about context. And part of what the tool does is allow enterprises to say, we did or did not do this because, and be able to document an explanation as to why they took the decision to do things as much as was reasonably practicable. Also then have regard to, this is one of Marina's favourites because she's a lawyer, the legal obligation to consider specific matters. It requires a documented step that you have considered, but you may quite validly choose not to do anything with respect to that obligation because of whatever reason you define. Any other legalese you'd want to put in there, Marina?
Thank you, Tim. So I think probably to add, there is a breakdown for CIRMP obligations and telecommunication security obligations, and there is a different balance between must so far as is reasonably practicable, and must have regard to. So there is a different balance between those two, and perhaps it was due the development of telecommunication security rules and introduction them only this year. Things have changed a bit. So in terms of maturity assessment categories, you will see the first probably 4 are expressly specified in the rules in terms of what your risk management program needs to address: cyber and information security, personnel, supply chain, physical security, and natural hazards. Of course, governance and oversight, it's embedded in the SOC Act and the rules as well, and that's the core that holds CIRMP together. Risk identification and registering, it's the heart, as I would say, of your risk management program, because if you know your security risks, then you understand why everything exists around them. Policy integration and implementation, reporting and continuous improvement, they more fit within ongoing cycle plan, do, check, act, which we'll cover a bit later.
In terms of the maturity levels, in our model, we adopted a 4-level criteria, as you can see there. We've looked at the best practice, international standards. We've looked at what's relevant to the protective security policy framework and so on. So we're confident that the descriptors we've put there are fit for purpose, certainly as a starting point. Also, our model is not prescriptive. So based on your operational context, and when Mark speaks later, he'll amplify this point, based on your context, you can modify these to fit your operational context, but you won't need to vary too far from these to get a very workable, valid model going forward.
So this is the example of one of 59 or 77, depending the sector, coming from requirements. So we picked up personnel security, and we picked up identification of critical workers because it's been a sensitive and pretty challenging topic for many organizations. So you can see there is a requirement in section 9.1a of the rules a responsible entity must establish and maintain a process or system in CIRMP to identify the entity's critical workers. And we broke it down with the levels for 4 levels of maturity, with informal, basic, managed, enhanced. And you can see we broke them down with critical positions, which I think closer to truth than critical workers, for employees and contractors or outsourced staff, because the measures, the controls, the ways of identification and management would be different.
You'll also notice here in the left column, number 31, it's obligation 31, and with that red marker, it shows you it's a must. So it gives you a nice clear key about what the importance of the issue is, the category it's in, the reference point, the requirement itself, and then it breaks down those issues as we have here for critical positions for employees and for contractors outsourced. So this is emblematic of how the tool is laid out. And this is the Word version. There is a Excel version as well, which we'll talk to in due course. But the virtue of having it in this way is you can then take your notes. So you can make this into a larger Word document if you like, and then start to record your data in that far column on the right.
So you will add more evidence, and when you're filling it in, you will instinctively already know where you sit with the maturity level. So basically, as Tim mentioned, we have 2 templates, one in Word, one in Excel. When you do preliminary assessment, you fill everything in Word, and it also creates a record of your maturity assessment and evaluation.
Probably the other point to add to here, because this is not an audit, you're not seeking to record every possible piece of evidence in that right-hand column. You're trying to get enough evidence there that can be found again, that can be referenced to meet one of the criteria. Once you've met it, you don't need to meet it more, you've met it.
And this is the snapshot from Excel spreadsheet. This is where you will see, once again, description. And then when you identify your maturity level, you score with 1, 2, 3, 4, or the level to help you to produce the heat map. And this is the example of CIRMP security maturity heat map. We looked at data, for example, the Department of Home Affairs produced as the result of the first trial audits and the first lot of CIRMP annual assessments, what Hamish Hansford shared with everyone in November in terms of data, and we modeled it in terms of how it would look like in terms of maturity and what's currently the snapshot.
One of the virtues of this presentation is you can put this to your senior managers, to your board in a visual way, and you'll have that clear impact about where they rank. The other thing you could add to this is where your risk appetite in your organisation is, and you can overlay that as well. And you might be able to say, for instance, our risk appetite for cyber and information security is 3. But we're nearly 4, so maybe we're not overachieving, but maybe we don't need to invest a lot more in that at the moment because we've met our risk appetite criteria. Personnel security is below where we want it to be. Maybe we need to put resources and effort back into that side of our security manifest. So this allows you to have a very good representation and stimulate a discussion with the board and the C-suites.